Was the decision you made this morning truly yours, or was it merely the echo of an external frequency processed by your nervous system? Before you even spoke to anyone, before you consciously chose your mood, something may already have influenced you. A message, a headline, a memory, a subtle tension in your body. In wave physics, there is a phenomenon called entrainment, where a stronger vibration forces a weaker one to follow it. Over time, the weaker rhythm stops leading and simply synchronizes. The uncomfortable possibility is this: your mind may have stopped vibrating on its own essential note. It may be adapting, adjusting, syncing, without you realizing it. And if that is true, then a deeper question emerges, one that quietly shapes your future. Who is conducting your mental orchestra while you believe you are in control? There is a simple experiment in physics that reveals something unsettling about the way your mind works. Place two pendulum clocks on the same wall. At first, they swing out of rhythm, but given enough time, something strange happens. They begin to synchronize. The stronger rhythm gradually pulls the weaker one into alignment. This phenomenon is called entrainment. One vibration overrides another until they move as one. Now pause for a moment and consider this. Your nervous system functions in rhythms. Brain waves oscillate. Your heart beats in patterns. Your breath follows cycles. You are, in a very literal sense, a field of frequencies interacting with other fields around you. And like those clocks on the wall, you are constantly synchronizing with whatever vibration is strongest in your environment. The problem is not that entrainment exists. The problem is that most people are unaware it is happening. Think about this morning. Did you wake up calm or already tense? Did your mood shift after checking your phone? Did a headline, a message, or even the tone of someone's voice subtly change your internal state? Nothing physical may have happened, yet your emotional climate altered. That is entrainment in action, your inner rhythm adjusted to an external signal. You might believe your thoughts are generated in isolation, as if your mind were a sealed chamber. But it is more like an open tuning fork. Strike another fork nearby, and yours will begin to hum at the same pitch. Spend enough time in an atmosphere of urgency, outrage, or fear, and your nervous system will calibrate to that frequency. It will feel natural after a while. You may even defend it as just the way things are. But is it? Notice how easily your attention is captured. A notification sound, a breaking news alert, a heated conversation in the background. Your body responds before you consciously choose to respond. Shoulders tighten, breath shortens, thoughts accelerate. The external rhythm has already entered your system, and here is the subtle cost. When your internal rhythm is constantly adjusting to the loudest signal around you, it stops generating its own stable pattern. Autonomy fades quietly, not dramatically, quietly. You may start the day with a clear intention, yet by midday you are scattered. Your mood shifts without a clear cause. You feel slightly off, but you cannot name why. That off feeling is often the result of oscillating between multiple external influences, none of which were chosen deliberately. This is not mystical, it is physiological. The brain is wired for adaptation. It mirrors, it predicts, it aligns. In evolutionary terms, this kept us safe. Synchronizing with the tribe meant survival. But in a world saturated with digital signals and constant stimulation, your mind is exposed to thousands of competing rhythms every day. Without realizing it, you are tuning yourself to whatever is loudest. Try something simple right now. Close your eyes for a few seconds and scan your body. Is your jaw relaxed or tight? Is your breathing deep or shallow? Is there a low hum of agitation under the surface? Do not judge it, just observe. Then ask yourself a direct question. Is this state truly mine, or did I absorb it? Stay with that question for a moment longer than is comfortable. You may notice something surprising. The state you are in does not feel entirely self-generated. It feels borrowed. This does not mean you are weak, it means you are permeable. And permeability, without awareness, turns into vulnerability. A chaotic environment produces a chaotic internal rhythm. A frantic informational space produces a fragmented mental state. Over time, you lose the memory of what your own steady frequency feels like. The deeper issue is that entrainment does not only affect mood, it affects perception. When your internal rhythm speeds up, your thinking becomes reactive. When it slows excessively, clarity dulls. You interpret events through the state you are synchronized with. The same situation looks threatening under one frequency and manageable under another. So when you say, "I just feel this way," it is worth asking, who set the tempo? There is another layer to this. Entrainment happens most easily when one system lacks coherence. A strong, steady rhythm is harder to override, but a scattered one yields quickly. If your attention is divided, if your energy is depleted, if your mind jumps from stimulus to stimulus, your internal rhythm weakens. And weaker rhythms do not lead, they follow. This is why some days you feel centered and difficult to disturb. On those days, external noise seems distant. Other days, a small comment or minor inconvenience throws you completely off balance. The difference is not the world. The difference is the stability of your internal oscillation. The uncomfortable truth is that many people have not felt their own baseline frequency in years. It has been masked by the constant pull of external signals. They mistake adaptation for identity. They believe the shifting moods, the restless thoughts, the low-grade anxiety are simply who I am. First tell me, but what if that is only the echo of the environment? And if your rhythm can be pulled outward so easily, what does that imply about the observer within you, the one who is supposed to choose, to focus, to direct attention? What happens to that observer when it is constantly dragged by competing vibrations? The next step is to look at what fragmentation does to that inner witness and how a divided attention dissolves the very center from which real choice is made. There is a principle in quantum physics that says a wave of possibilities collapses into a single outcome when it is observed. Observation is not passive, it is organizing. It selects, it gives form. Without a clear observer, reality remains scattered across probabilities. Now bring that idea inward. Your life at any given moment contains multiple possible reactions, interpretations, and decisions. The role of the conscious observer within you is to select one path with clarity. But what happens when that observer is no longer steady? What happens when attention is fractured into dozens of competing streams? The result is not freedom, it is diffusion. Imagine holding a magnifying glass under the sun. When the lens is stable and focused, light converges into a single point strong enough to ignite fire. But if your hand trembles constantly, the light scatters. It warms the surface, perhaps, but it never transforms it. Your attention works the same way. When it is steady, it has creative force. When it is divided, it loses power. Right now, most minds operate in fragmentation. You begin reading something, then remember a task. While thinking about that task, you check a message. The message triggers a memory. The memory sparks a worry. The worry pulls you into a future scenario, all within seconds. And through it all, there is a subtle sense that you are present, that you are in control. But are you? Or are you simply moving between fragments? When attention is constantly redirected, the observer inside you weakens, not because it disappears, but because it never stabilizes long enough to fully see. You are looking at your life through a cracked mirror. Each shard reflects a different version of you. The responsible one, the anxious one, the ambitious one, the resentful one. None of them are false, but none of them alone are whole. Have you noticed how your sense of self shifts depending on context? In one conversation, you feel confident. In another, uncertain. Alone, you may feel reflective. In a group, reactive. These shifts are natural to some degree, but when the internal center is fragmented, these versions do not feel like flexible expressions. They feel like different people fighting for control. The conscious observer is meant to integrate these parts. It is the quiet awareness that says, I notice the anxiety, but I'm not only anxiety. It says, I see the anger, but I can choose how to respond. Without that stable vantage point, emotions and impulses collapse directly into action. Take a moment now. Slow down. Notice the next thought that appears in your mind. Do not chase it. Just watch it as if it were a cloud passing across the sky. Then notice the next one, and the next. As you do this, something subtle becomes clear. There is the thought and there is the awareness of the thought. They are not the same. That awareness is the observer. But here is the challenge. When your attention is constantly pulled outward, toward noise, urgency, endless input, you lose contact with that witnessing position. Thoughts blend together. Reactions feel automatic. The space between stimulus and response shrinks, and without space, there is no real choice. This is where fragmentation becomes dangerous. A fragmented observer cannot collapse possibility into intention. It hesitates, overthinks, or reacts impulsively. It oscillates between options without grounding in any of them. Decision fatigue sets in. Doubt grows louder. You begin to question your own clarity because clarity requires sustained attention. The modern environment is not designed for sustained attention. It rewards speed, novelty, emotional spikes. Each spike pulls a fragment of your awareness away from the center. Over time, the center feels distant. You may even feel slightly unreal at times, as if you are watching your life instead of directing it. That sensation is not weakness, it is a signal. It is the signal that your observer has been stretched thin. When the observer is fragmented, reality feels overwhelming, not because life has become objectively harder, but because your ability to organize experience has weakened. Events blur together, priorities become unclear. You move but without a stable axis, and without a stable axis, even small disturbances feel large. The deeper issue is this: when you cannot clearly distinguish between the voice of awareness and the stream of thoughts, you start to identify with every mental impulse. Each worry feels like truth. Each fear feels like identity. The separation between "I am thinking" and "I am this thought" collapses. That is where the next error begins to form. If the observer is fractured and attention is scattered, how do you know which inner voice is truly yours? How do you distinguish between your authentic intention and the noise you have absorbed from the world around you? When multiple internal voices speak at once, it becomes easy to assume they all belong to you. And that assumption may be the most subtle mistake of all. There is a quiet assumption most people never question. If a thought appears in my mind, it must be mine. It feels intimate. It speaks in your voice. It uses your memories. So you accept it as identity. But what if that assumption is flawed? Consider how language entered your life. The words you use were taught to you. The tone you carry was shaped by family, culture, teachers, media, repeated conversations. Even your inner critic often echoes phrases you once heard from someone else. Yet, when those phrases replay inside your head, they feel self-generated. The mind is not a sealed chamber producing original content in isolation. It is more like an open channel receiving, processing, and retransmitting signals. Some of those signals are deeply authentic, others are borrowed. The difficulty is that they arrive through the same internal speaker. Picture yourself driving a car. Your hands are on the wheel, you believe you are steering, but suddenly the wheel jerks slightly to the side. Then again, and again. You look down and realize there are other hands resting on the wheel with yours. They are subtle, almost transparent, but they influence direction. In your mental life, those extra hands are the invading voices. They can sound like urgency that isn't yours, comparison that wasn't present a moment ago, fear that appears without a direct threat, a harsh evaluation of yourself that feels disproportionate to the situation. The voice says, "You're behind. You're not enough. You need to react now." And because it speaks fluently in your internal language, you rarely question its origin. Pause for a moment and recall a recent negative thought about yourself. Hear the tone of it. Is it calm and precise, or exaggerated and absolute? Does it leave space for growth, or does it label you permanently? Very often, the invading voice speaks in extremes. It is impatient. It demands immediate emotional reaction. Now ask yourself something gently but honestly. When did I first learn to speak to myself this way? You may notice memories surfacing, a critical authority figure, a competitive environment, a cultural narrative about success or failure. These influences do not disappear, they internalize. Over time, they operate automatically and you mistake them for your core identity. The error is not that these voices exist, the error is identification. When you fully identify with every thought, you give it authority. A passing worry becomes a personal truth. A fleeting comparison becomes a self-definition. The more you identify, the less distance you have from the mental stream. And without distance, you cannot evaluate what is useful and what is interference. Think about how radio frequencies work. Multiple stations broadcast simultaneously. Your receiver selects one based on tuning, but if the tuner is unstable, signals overlap. Static blends with music, words blur. You do not hear a clear program, you hear noise layered over intention. A fragmented observer cannot tune precisely, so the mind picks up dominant cultural frequencies by default: productivity anxiety, social comparison, fear of missing out, constant evaluation. These signals are strong, they repeat often, and repetition creates familiarity. Familiarity creates the illusion of truth. This is why the invading voice feels convincing. It often speaks with urgency. It insists that immediate reaction equals safety. It equates discomfort with danger. It narrows your perspective until the present moment feels like a threat to your worth or stability. And when you react from that voice, your behavior reinforces it. The loop strengthens. There is a simple experiment you can try right now. The next time a strong thought arises, especially one charged with emotion, do not argue with it. Instead, add a small phrase before it. A thought is appearing that says, for example, a thought is appearing that says, "I'm failing." Notice what happens. That slight shift creates space. You are no longer fused with the statement. You are observing it. In that space, something powerful returns: choice. Not every thought deserves action. Not every internal voice deserves obedience. Some are outdated survival scripts. Some are echoes of collective fear. Some are projections absorbed from environments that are no longer relevant to who you are becoming. But if you never question the origin of the voice, you will obey it automatically. And here is where the cost becomes deeper. When invading voices dominate your internal space, they drain energy. Constant self-critique consumes mental resources. Chronic comparison exhausts attention. Ongoing low-level fear tightens the body and accelerates the nervous system. Over time, this depletion weakens your will. A tired mind does not filter effectively. It accepts suggestions more easily. It reacts instead of choosing. And as energy drops, resistance to external influence fades. You become more permeable, more suggestible, more likely to move in directions that were never consciously selected. This is not dramatic. It is gradual. The identification error opens the door. Energy drain widens it. And once your vitality is low, the boundary between your authentic intention and external suggestion becomes even thinner. Which leads to a deeper question. What happens to your autonomy when your mental energy is no longer strong enough to sustain it? In physics, entropy describes the natural drift from order to disorder. Without energy invested into maintaining structure, systems break down. Heat disperses, patterns dissolve, coherence fades. The same principle quietly governs your attention. Your mind does not remain organized by default. It requires energy to stay clear, focused, and intentional. When that energy drops, disorder increases. Thoughts scatter, priorities blur, emotional reactivity rises. You feel busy but strangely unproductive, stimulated yet unfocused. Attention is not just a mental preference, it is a biological resource. Every time you switch tasks, react to a notification, replay a conversation, or anticipate a future problem, your brain consumes energy. Glucose is used, neurotransmitters fluctuate, stress hormones shift. None of this feels dramatic in the moment, but over hours and days, the cost accumulates. You may notice it as a subtle heaviness behind the eyes, a shorter temper, a decreased tolerance for ambiguity. Decisions that once felt simple begin to feel overwhelming. This is not a failure of character, it is entropy at work. When attention fragments repeatedly, your nervous system stays slightly activated. Even low-level activation requires fuel, and when the fuel runs low, your capacity to hold a steady intention weakens. You default to what is easiest, loudest, or most habitual. A tired mind does not carefully evaluate incoming signals. It accepts them. Think about how you function after a poor night's sleep. You are more irritable, more reactive, less patient. The same principle applies to cognitive overload. When your mental energy is drained by constant input and internal noise, your willpower thins. The boundary between I choose this and I'm just reacting becomes blurry. There is a moment you can observe this clearly. Recall a time when you were deeply rested and emotionally grounded. In that state, an unexpected problem arises. You pause, you assess, you respond with proportion. Now compare that to a day when you are exhausted. The same problem feels larger. Your response is sharper, faster, less measured. The external event did not change. Your internal energy did. Entropy of attention shows up as compulsive scrolling when you intended to rest, as saying yes when you meant to say no, as revisiting the same worry even after you decided it was unproductive. It feels like a slight loss of command over your own steering wheel. And here is the deeper cost. When energy is low, your resistance to suggestion decreases. Advertising works better on the tired. Fear spreads faster through the anxious. Group emotion pulls more strongly on the depleted. This is not a moral weakness, it is neurobiology. A fatigued brain seeks shortcuts. It prefers simple narratives. It avoids the effort of nuanced thinking. Over time, this creates a subtle dependency. Instead of generating your own direction, you consume direction. Instead of creating perspective, you absorb it. The less energy you have, the more you rely on external cues to tell you what matters. This is how autonomy erodes quietly. Notice your body for a moment. Is your breathing shallow? Are your shoulders slightly raised? Is there a background tension you have normalized? Chronic low-level stress drains energy continuously. You may have adapted to it so completely that calm feels unfamiliar. Place one hand on your chest and take a slow breath, deeper than usual. Hold it gently, then release it even slower. As you do, feel how the body responds. Even a single conscious breath begins restoring a small amount of order. It signals safety. It reduces unnecessary activation. That tiny shift illustrates something important. Energy can be recovered, but only through deliberate attention. The challenge is that entropy accelerates itself. When your attention is scattered, you make choices that scatter it further. You check one more thing. You replay one more thought. You agree to one more obligation. Each small decision seems harmless, but collectively they create cognitive noise, and noise consumes energy. The more noise you tolerate, the less vitality remains for conscious action. You begin operating in automatic mode, not because you prefer it, but because you lack the energy for intentional engagement. Biological reaction replaces thoughtful response. Survival patterns replace creativity. At this point, even spiritual intuition becomes difficult to access, not because it disappeared, but because subtle signals require calm perception. A chaotic system cannot detect quiet guidance. It only reacts to strong stimuli. This is where the cycle deepens. Energy drains, attention fragments, external influence increases, automatic reactions take over, and once reaction becomes your default mode, you may not even notice how little of your behavior is truly chosen. Which raises an uncomfortable realization. If most of your day is spent reacting rather than consciously directing, what would it mean to step out of that loop? There is a subtle difference between acting and reacting. Acting begins with a pause. Reacting skips the pause entirely. When your energy is low and your attention is scattered, the nervous system defaults to speed. It scans for threat, discomfort, opportunity, validation. It does not wait for careful reflection. It moves first and explains later. This is efficient for survival. It is not designed for conscious living. The reaction loop is simple and fast. A stimulus appears. Your body registers it. A feeling rises. A thought attaches to the feeling. Behavior follows. The entire sequence can unfold in seconds, sometimes less. Most of the time you are not aware of the middle steps. You only notice the result. Someone sends a short message. Your chest tightens. A thought appears. They're upset with me. You respond defensively. Later you realize the interpretation was inaccurate, but by then the reaction has already shaped reality. The loop runs on familiarity. The brain prefers patterns it has practiced. If you have reacted with worry in the past, worry becomes the quickest available path. If you have reacted with irritation, irritation activates automatically. Over time, these reactions feel like personality. I'm just like this, you might say. But what you call personality is often repetition. The body plays a central role in this loop. Before a clear thought forms, the nervous system shifts. Heart rate changes, muscles tense, breath alters. These shifts are signals, yet in a reactive life, they are ignored. The body moves into alert mode and the mind rushes to justify it. Notice how often your day is punctuated by micro surges of urgency, a notification sound, a sudden request, an unexpected delay. Each one triggers a small spike of activation. If there is no conscious interruption, those spikes string together into a constant background state of mild stress. From there, reaction becomes the default language. Try something small right now. Recall the last time you felt irritated today. Go back to that moment in your mind. Before the words formed, what happened in your body? Did your jaw tighten? Did your stomach contract? Did your breathing become shallow? Stay with the physical memory for a few seconds. You are tracing the loop backward. This is where freedom hides, in the gap between sensation and interpretation. When you become aware of the bodily shift, you interrupt the automatic chain. You may still feel the emotion, but you are no longer compelled to act on it instantly. The pause returns. And with the pause, choice returns. The difficulty is that constant stimulation shrinks this gap. Fast environments reward quick responses. Social systems amplify emotional reactions. Digital platforms are built around triggering engagement. The more reactive you are, the more you participate. The more you participate, the more reinforced the loop becomes. Eventually, you live in what feels like continuous response mode. Even rest becomes reactive. You do not choose to check your phone. Your hand moves almost before you decide. You do not plan to worry. The scenario unfolds automatically. You are not consciously selecting most of your internal states. They are being triggered and replayed. This has a cost beyond fatigue. Creativity requires psychological space. Intuition requires calm perception. Deep decision-making requires sustained attention. In a reaction loop, none of these have room to emerge. You operate close to the surface of your mind, skimming stimuli without depth. And here is something even more subtle. When reaction dominates, your sense of self narrows. You begin to define yourself by what you oppose, what you fear, what you defend against. Identity becomes shaped by triggers. The world presses a button and you respond predictably. Predictability feels stable, but it is not sovereignty. Imagine living one day where every response is preceded by a conscious breath, not a dramatic pause, just one steady inhale before speaking, before sending, before deciding. Notice how different that day would feel. Slower, perhaps, but also clearer, more deliberate. That single breath is a break in the loop. The reason this matters is not simply emotional regulation. It is autonomy. If you cannot pause, you cannot choose. If you cannot choose, you are being steered by patterns laid down in the past and reinforced by the present environment. And if that steering continues long enough, something deeper begins to erode. Reaction gradually replaces intention. Habits replace vision. The will that once directed your life starts to dissolve into a sequence of impulses. You may not notice it at first. It feels like convenience, it feels like efficiency. But over time, the question becomes unavoidable. Are you directing your life, or are you simply responding to whatever presses hardest against you? Will is quieter than impulse. It does not shout. It does not rush. It does not demand immediate gratification. True will feels steady, almost calm. It holds direction over time. It chooses based on meaning rather than pressure. And because it is subtle, it is often drowned out in a world that amplifies urgency. When reaction becomes your default mode, will begins to weaken, not because it disappears, but because it is rarely exercised. Like a muscle left unused, it loses strength gradually. You still believe you are choosing, but many of your choices are simply responses to external cues and internal habits. There is a difference between wanting something in a moment and willing something across time. Wanting is emotional and immediate. Will is structured and deliberate. Wanting says, I feel like this now. Will says, this is who I intend to become. When your system is overloaded with stimuli, wanting dominates. It is faster, easier, louder. Think about how often you plan to do something meaningful, only to find yourself pulled elsewhere. You intend to read, but you scroll. You intend to reflect, but you react to a message. You intend to rest, but you consume more input. Each individual moment seems small, yet collectively they shape your trajectory. The dissolution of will does not feel dramatic. It feels like distraction. It feels like postponement. It feels like, I'll start tomorrow. But underneath that postponement is a subtle shift. Your internal compass is no longer setting the direction. External signals are. Modern systems are designed to anticipate your impulses. Algorithms study patterns of behavior and feed you what keeps you engaged. The more predictable your reactions, the easier it becomes to guide them. Over time, your preferences are reinforced in loops. You are shown what aligns with what you already clicked, liked, feared, or desired. Gradually, your world narrows. This narrowing has psychological consequences. When your mental space is constantly occupied by pre-selected stimuli, your capacity to generate original direction shrinks. You move within the boundaries of what is presented to you. You consume more than you create. You respond more than you initiate. Ask yourself something honestly. How many of your daily decisions are proactive, and how many are reactive? Not in a self-critical way, but in a clear-eyed way. Do you begin the day with intention? Or do you wake up and immediately absorb the intentions of others through news, messages, and demands? When will is strong, you can enter any environment without being absorbed by it. When will is weak, the environment defines your priorities for you. This does not mean you are incapable. It means your energy has been allocated elsewhere. Every time you follow an impulse without reflection, you reinforce that pathway. Every time you override a deeper intention for short-term comfort, you make the next override easier. Over months and years, this becomes identity. You may begin to feel like a diluted version of yourself, not entirely lost, but less distinct. Your opinions echo prevailing narratives. Your emotional reactions mirror collective trends. Your goals align suspiciously well with what is being promoted around you. Nothing feels entirely false, yet something feels slightly unchosen. That feeling is important. It is the quiet awareness that you are living by patterns you did not consciously design. There is also a biological dimension to this. Repeated reactive behavior strengthens neural pathways. The brain becomes efficient at what it practices. If it practices distraction, it becomes skilled at distraction. If it practices outrage, it becomes quick to anger. If it practices avoidance, it becomes comfortable postponing discomfort. Efficiency without awareness can look like personality, but it is often conditioning. Will requires friction. It requires the ability to tolerate discomfort without escaping it immediately. It requires holding a direction even when the environment tempts you otherwise. This is not about rigid control. It is about alignment. Pause for a moment and remember a time when you followed through on something difficult but meaningful. Perhaps a health change, a conversation you avoided, a commitment you honored. Notice the quality of that memory. There is usually a sense of solidity, integrity. You feel more like yourself in those moments. Now contrast that with moments when you drifted into habits you did not respect. The feeling is different, slightly fragmented, slightly diminished. When will dissolves, you become easier to steer, not only by technology or media, but by moods, by social pressure, by fear of exclusion. Your inner direction fades into the background. You move according to currents rather than compass. And yet here is the turning point. Will is not destroyed, it is obscured. Beneath layers of reaction, beneath fatigue and conditioning, it remains intact. The question is whether you are willing to confront what stands between you and it, because sometimes the greatest interference is not external systems or algorithms. Sometimes it is your own resistance to stillness. When silence appears, when there is space to choose deliberately, something uncomfortable arises, and many people would rather return to noise than face that discomfort, which leads to a surprising realization about where the deepest interference truly begins. At some point, The interference stops coming only from the outside. It begins to echo from within. Imagine walking into a hall of mirrors. Every direction reflects a version of you. Some mirrors stretch your shape, others compress it. Some distort your face subtly, others dramatically. After a while, you are no longer sure which reflection is accurate. You turn in circles, trying to find the original image, but every angle shows a variation. This is what the inner world can become when silence feels threatening. When external noise slows down, when distractions fade for a moment, something vast appears. It is not dramatic, it is spacious. It is the simple awareness of being alive without constant input. For many people, that space feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, so the mind quickly fills it. It replays conversations. It invents future scenarios. It reanalyzes past mistakes. It creates small internal dramas. Not because you consciously choose to suffer, but because noise feels safer than openness. Noise gives you something to hold on to. It creates edges where there might otherwise be infinity. There is a subtle addiction to mental movement. Constant thinking produces the illusion of control. If you keep analyzing, predicting, rehearsing, you feel active, engaged, responsible. But beneath that activity, there may be avoidance. Avoidance of what? Of stillness, of uncertainty, of the fact that without constant narrative, you are simply awareness observing experience. That simplicity can feel disorienting at first. It removes familiar labels. It exposes how much of your identity is built from ongoing commentary. Try something gently challenging. Sit quietly for 2 minutes without reaching for a device, without planning, without reviewing. Just sit. Notice what happens. You may feel restlessness rise. Thoughts may accelerate. You may suddenly remember tasks that feel urgent. The mind generates content quickly to escape the quiet. Watch this process carefully. It is like standing in the mirror labyrinth and realizing that many reflections are self-created. You are not only being influenced, you are participating in the distortion. There is no need to judge this. The mind evolved to simulate possibilities. It scans for problems. It constructs narratives. This ability is useful, but when it becomes compulsive, it builds walls inside your own awareness. You start to live more in reflection than in direct perception. The labyrinth deepens when you begin identifying with every reflection. One day you see yourself as capable. The next day as inadequate. One moment you feel purposeful, the next lost. Instead of recognizing these as shifting mental states, you treat them as absolute truths. You move through corridors of self-definition, reacting to each image as if it were final. This creates a strange loop. You feel fragmented because of external noise. You try to regain control by thinking more. The thinking multiplies perspectives and interpretations. Fragmentation increases. So you think even more, trying to solve the confusion created by excessive thought. It becomes self-reinforcing. And yet, at the center of the labyrinth, there is something unchanged. The awareness that notices the confusion has not been distorted. It has simply been overlooked. The problem is not that you lack clarity. It is that you keep searching for clarity in the reflections instead of in the observer. Consider a moment when you experienced sudden clarity, perhaps during a walk, a quiet morning, or after a deep conversation. For a brief time, everything felt aligned. Decisions seemed simple. You were not forcing insight. It appeared naturally. That clarity did not come from adding more thoughts. It came from subtracting noise. Clarity emerges when the mirrors stop multiplying. There is also responsibility here. It is easier to blame external systems for your mental state. It is harder to admit that you sometimes choose stimulation over stillness. You choose the familiar chaos because it prevents you from facing deeper questions. What do I truly want? What matters to me beyond immediate comfort? Who am I without constant input? Those questions require courage because they do not come with instant answers. They require sitting in open space long enough for something authentic to surface. The labyrinth is not a prison built by others alone. It is maintained by your own reluctance to pause. And until you see that clearly, you will continue searching for control in the very patterns that fragment you. But when you begin tolerating silence, even briefly, something shifts. The reflections lose intensity. The mental noise softens. Beneath it, there is a steadier tone. Not dramatic, not loud, just stable. And when that tone becomes audible again, you start to recognize what has always been yours, a kind of internal resonance that does not need constant reinforcement. A frequency that feels coherent rather than chaotic. The question then becomes how to strengthen that resonance deliberately, so it is no longer drowned out by external signals or internal noise. When two musical notes are in harmony, something remarkable happens. They do not compete for space, they amplify each other. The sound feels fuller, clearer, more alive. There is no strain in it, no forcing, just alignment. Your inner life can move the same way. After noise settles, after the constant reaction slows even slightly, a steadier rhythm begins to surface. It does not shout for attention, it feels grounded. When you act from that place, your decisions carry less friction. Conversations feel cleaner, even challenges seem more defined, less chaotic. This is not mystical, it is coherence. Coherence happens when your thoughts, emotions, and actions point in the same direction. When what you say matches what you value. When what you choose aligns with what you know to be true for you. In that state, energy is not wasted on internal contradiction. Think about a time when you made a decision that felt deeply right. Not convenient, not easy, but right. There was probably a sense of calm underneath it. Even if fear was present, it did not dominate. There was a steady undercurrent that said, "This is aligned." That undercurrent is your internal resonance. Now compare that with moments when you acted against your own sense of direction. Perhaps you agreed to something that drained you. Perhaps you stayed silent when you needed to speak. On the surface, everything seemed fine, but internally, there was tension, a slight dissonance. Energy leaked because part of you was moving one way while another part resisted. Dissonance consumes vitality. Resonance restores it. The interesting part is that resonance often returns in simple moments. A quiet morning without rushing. A walk where your breathing finds a natural rhythm. A conversation where you are fully present instead of rehearsing responses. In those moments, life feels less effortful. Not because circumstances are perfect, but because you are not internally divided. Notice your body again. When you feel aligned, your breath tends to deepen naturally. Your posture adjusts. Your muscles soften. There is space between stimulus and response. That physical coherence mirrors mental coherence. The nervous system shifts out of constant alert and into a more balanced state. This shift allows perception to sharpen. You begin noticing subtleties you previously missed. Opportunities appear where you once saw only obstacles. Connections make sense without overanalysis. What some call synchronicity often emerges from this clarity. When your internal state is coherent, you recognize patterns more easily. You respond to them deliberately rather than reactively. There is a small practice you can try right now. Think of a decision you are currently facing. Instead of analyzing it mentally, bring attention to your body. Imagine choosing option A. Notice what happens in your chest, your stomach, your breathing. Then imagine choosing option B. Observe again. One option may feel slightly more open, more steady. The other may feel contracted or heavy. This is not superstition. It is sensitivity to coherence. The body often registers alignment before the mind articulates it. Harmonic resonance is not about eliminating difficulty. It is about reducing internal contradiction. When you are in resonance, effort feels purposeful rather than draining. Even fatigue has meaning. You recover faster because you are not fighting yourself. But resonance requires protection. If you immediately flood your senses with noise after touching that steady state, the signal weakens. It is like tuning a radio carefully, only to spin the dial wildly again. The clarity disappears. This is why brief, intentional pauses matter, not as an escape from life, but as recalibration. Each pause is an opportunity to return to your baseline frequency. Over time, that baseline becomes more stable. External chaos may still exist, but it does not override your internal rhythm as easily. The deeper benefit of resonance is that it rebuilds trust in yourself. When you repeatedly act from alignment and see consistent outcomes, confidence grows naturally. You no longer need constant external validation because your internal signal is strong enough to guide you. Yet maintaining this state requires more than occasional silence. It requires a deliberate relationship with intention. Without intention, even resonance can fade into passivity. The question becomes how to transform this felt coherence into something structured, something you can return to consistently rather than accidentally. Because resonance is powerful, but without direction, it remains a pleasant state instead of a guiding force. Intention is often misunderstood as wishful thinking. It is not. Intention is direction applied to attention. It is the deliberate act of choosing what you will amplify in your inner and outer world. In physics, observation influences outcomes at the smallest scales, not in a magical way, but in a measurable one. The act of measuring changes what is measured. In your own life, attention works similarly. Whatever you consistently observe, you strengthen. Whatever you repeatedly focus on, you give structure to. The problem is not that you lack intention. The problem is that most of your intention is unconscious. It is scattered across worries, distractions, and habits. You may say you want clarity, yet spend hours feeding confusion. You may say you value peace, yet continuously expose yourself to agitation. Your nervous system cannot distinguish between what you casually consume and what you deeply choose. It simply adapts to repetition. Pure intention begins with filtering. Before a thought becomes a belief, before information becomes emotion, there is a brief moment of entry. Something appears in your awareness. In that instant, you have more influence than you realize. You can lean toward it or let it pass. You can reinforce it or refuse to give it energy. This is subtle work. It requires that you notice the doorway. Right now, pause and observe the next piece of information that reaches you. It might be a sound in the room, a sensation in your body, a memory. Instead of automatically engaging with it, simply acknowledge it. Feel the difference between noticing and absorbing. That difference is where intention lives. Pure intention is not forceful. It does not fight every unwanted thought. Fighting often strengthens what you resist. Instead, it redirects. It chooses where to stand. Imagine standing at the edge of a river with a strong current. If you jump in carelessly, you will be carried downstream. If you stand firmly on the bank, you can watch the current without being taken by it. Thoughts, trends, and emotional waves are currents. Intention is your footing. There is a practical way to build this footing. Each morning, before you enter the flow of external input, define one internal quality you will embody that day. Not a task, not a goal, a quality. Calm, precision, patience, courage. Choose one. Say it quietly to yourself. Feel it for a few seconds in your body. This primes your nervous system. It sets a baseline. As the day unfolds, you will be pulled by many forces. But when you remember your chosen quality, you create alignment again. You are not reacting blindly. You are measuring your responses against something you selected consciously. This is where science and spirituality meet in a grounded way. The brain strengthens what it practices. When you repeatedly return to a chosen intention, neural pathways reinforce that pattern. Over time, it becomes easier to access. What once required effort becomes more natural. However, there is a danger here as well. Intention without honesty turns into self-deception. You can tell yourself you are acting with clarity, while actually being driven by fear. You can claim you are seeking growth while avoiding discomfort. That is why observation must accompany intention. At the end of the day, reflect briefly. Did your actions align with the quality you chose? Where did you drift? Not with judgment, but with precision. This closes the loop. You set direction, you observe results, you adjust. That is a technology. Simple, repeatable, grounded in behavior. Pure intention also requires subtraction. You cannot focus on everything. If you try, you dilute your signal. Choosing what to ignore is as important as choosing what to pursue. This means limiting unnecessary input. It means stepping back from conversations or content that repeatedly destabilize you. Not out of fear, but out of clarity. Your focus is finite. Treat it as valuable. When intention becomes steady, something shifts internally. You begin to feel less pulled by random impulses. Decisions become cleaner. You hesitate less because you know what you stand for. External noise still exists, but it does not dictate your rhythm as easily. Yet even with intention practiced daily, sovereignty is not permanent by default. It is maintained, protected, renewed. Without ongoing care, old patterns slowly return. Which raises a final and essential question. What does it truly mean to reclaim and sustain ownership of your own mind in a world designed to fragment it? Mental sovereignty is not a dramatic awakening. It is not a single breakthrough where everything suddenly becomes clear and stays that way. It is quieter than that. It is a daily contract you renew with yourself. Sovereignty means ownership. It means your inner space is governed by conscious choice rather than by habit, pressure, or noise. It does not mean you control every thought that appears. Thoughts will still arise. Emotions will still move. The world will still present challenges. Sovereignty means you decide what is allowed to take root. There is a difference between exposure and adoption. You can be exposed to fear without adopting it. You can hear an opinion without internalizing it. You can experience anger without becoming it. The restoration of sovereignty begins when you recognize that exposure is inevitable, but adoption is optional. For years, perhaps without noticing, you may have allowed your attention to be claimed automatically. Notifications dictated your focus. Headlines shaped your mood. Other people's urgency became your urgency. Over time, this created a subtle dependency. You looked outward to determine what deserved your energy. Reclaiming sovereignty requires reversing that direction. Instead of asking, "What is demanding my attention?" you begin asking, "What deserves my attention?" That shift is simple in wording, but profound in impact. It forces you to evaluate rather than absorb. Start with something practical. Choose a small window of your day where you do not consume any external input. No news, no messages, no scrolling. Even 15 minutes is enough. During that time, sit with your own thoughts. Journal. Walk. Breathe. Let your nervous system recalibrate without interference. This is not isolation, it is maintenance. Notice what happens when you create that boundary. At first, there may be restlessness. The mind may reach outward, searching for stimulation. Stay with the discomfort. Beneath it, there is a gradual settling. Your internal rhythm becomes more noticeable. Decisions feel less rushed. You are no longer moving at someone else's pace. Sovereignty also means guarding your interpretation of events. Two people can experience the same situation and derive completely different meanings from it. The event is external. The meaning is internal. When you automatically accept the most dramatic or negative interpretation, you surrender authorship of your own narrative. Pause more often before assigning meaning. Ask yourself, is this the only way to see this? That question alone restores space. In that space, you can choose a perspective aligned with clarity rather than fear. Energy management becomes central here. If you are exhausted, sovereignty weakens. A depleted mind defaults to old patterns. Protecting sleep, limiting unnecessary conflict, and setting boundaries are not luxuries. They are structural supports for autonomy. Without energy, intention collapses. There is also courage involved. When you stop tuning into certain frequencies of fear, outrage, or comparison, you may feel temporarily disconnected from collective conversations. You may notice how often social bonding revolves around shared anxiety or criticism. Choosing not to participate can feel isolating at first, but over time, it builds integrity. You begin to stand on your own mental ground. Feel the difference between reacting to every trend and selecting your engagements carefully. One feels scattered. The other feels deliberate. That deliberateness strengthens self-trust. You start to see evidence that you can direct your focus consistently. Each small act of alignment reinforces the next. Sovereignty does not require rigid control. It requires awareness and adjustment. Some days you will drift. Old loops may reappear. That is not failure. It is feedback. The key is noticing sooner, returning faster, refining your boundaries without self-judgment. Place your attention on your breathing for a moment. Slow it down slightly. Feel your body settle. In this simple act, you are demonstrating sovereignty. You are choosing where your awareness rests, No one else is directing it. That may seem small, but it is foundational. Over time, these small choices accumulate. You filter before absorbing. You pause before reacting. You align before acting. Gradually, your internal environment becomes less chaotic. The outside world may remain loud, but it no longer dictates your internal state automatically. And in that steadier state, something powerful returns. Not control in the sense of domination, but mastery in the sense of stewardship. You are not fighting the world. You are tuning yourself deliberately within it. When your focus becomes intentional and your energy protected, your mind regains its clarity. And from that clarity, your life begins to reflect decisions that are truly yours. Regaining control of your mind is not about fighting the world. It is about tuning yourself with care. Your attention is powerful. Your intention shapes direction. And your awareness is the quiet center that can never truly be taken from you, only forgotten. Every time you pause before reacting, every time you choose what deserves your focus, you restore your sovereignty. This is not abstract. It is daily, practical, and deeply personal. If you made it this far, write in the comments, "I choose my own frequency." That's how I'll know you stayed with me until the end. And if this resonated with you, watch one of the videos on your screen now. If you want more content like this, stay with us.